Everyone thinks they know Keanu Reeves. But away from the cameras, his sanctuary wasn't fame. It was 4 paws and a brindle coat. The Mojave heat pressed down like a physical weight, shimmering off the asphalt and baking the dust on the sprawling film set. This was day 53 of filming John Wick, Chapter 5. For Keanu, the break between setups was a ritual. It was a return to a simpler reality, a world that existed entirely in the silent communication between him and the dog at his side. Buddy, a pit bull with a blocky head and eyes the color of warm honey, sat patiently, his tail thumping a soft, steady rhythm against the leg of Keanu's tactical pants. He was a rescue, a dog whose past was a closed book, but whose present was one of unwavering devotion. Keanu unfolded a collapsible silicone bowl, a well-worn piece of gear as essential as any prop weapon, and filled it from a canteen. The water was cool, a small mercy in the furnace of the day. Buddy drank gratefully, his lapping the only sound in their small bubble of peace. The lunch spot was a small, dusty cafe, a half-mile from the set, a place of cracked vinyl booths and the honest smell of fried food. It was anonymous enough, usually. Today, the anonymity was shattered by the roar of engines. A trio of motorcycles, chrome glinting under the merciless sun, pulled up, their riders dismounting with the heavy, territorial swagger of men who own the road they stand on. They were big, clad in leather vests despite the heat, their arms canvases of faded ink. One of them, the largest, with a shaved head and a beard braided with silver rings, stomped toward the cafe entrance. His path intersected with Buddy, who had just finished drinking and was turning to follow Keanu inside. The man didn't break stride. He didn't sidestep. He simply swung his steel-toed boot in a short, brutal arc. The impact made a sickening thud. Buddy yelped, a sharp, piercing cry of shock and pain, and scrambled away, his back leg buckling. Keanu froze. The world narrowed to the sound of his dog's distress. Every instinct, every muscle memory honed over decades of fight training, screamed for retaliation. The man who kicked him was a caricature of aggression, a walking cliché. He smirked, a flash of yellowed teeth. "Get your damn nut out of the way." Keanu's gaze was flat, his expression unreadable. He walked past the biker, his movements fluid and deliberate, and knelt beside Buddy. He ran a gentle hand down the dog's flank, his fingers expertly checking for breaks, for the extent of the damage. Buddy whimpered, licking his hand, his body trembling. "It's okay, Buddy," Keanu murmured, his voice a low rumble. "You're okay." He looked up at the biker, who stood watching, arms crossed, flanked by his 2 silent companions. The air grew thick, charged with unspoken violence. The other patrons of the cafe had gone still, watching from the windows. A waitress, Maggie, her hand holding a coffee pot frozen mid-air, met Keanu's eyes for a split second. He saw fear, but also a flicker of something else. Defiance. "He was just getting a drink," Keanu said, his voice quiet but carrying with absolute clarity. It wasn't an accusation. It was a statement of fact. The biker scoffed. "It's a monster. Should be on a chain." On his vest, just below a snarling wolf's head, was a distinctive patch, a tiger's claw, 4 orange slashes with black tips, tearing through a field of gray. Keanu filed it away. The impulse to rise, to close the distance, to demonstrate with brutal efficiency the difference between a movie fight and real-world consequences, was a physical force inside him, but he crushed it. Violence was a tool, not an answer. Escalating this served nothing. It wouldn't unkick his dog. It wouldn't heal the bruise already forming on Buddy's hip. He stood, his height and coiled stillness making him seem larger than the biker. "There's no need for this." He reached into his pocket, pulled out a $20 bill, and placed it on the nearest table. "For his trouble," he said, nodding toward the biker. It was a disarming move, a maneuver of profound psychological jujitsu. It wasn't an apology. It was a dismissal. It reframed the biker not as a threat, but as a nuisance to be paid off. The man's face flushed with anger, his bravado short-circuiting. He was prepared for a fight, not for this. He grunted, unsure how to respond without looking foolish. Keanu turned his back on him, a calculated act of dominance, and gently guided Buddy toward his car, a vintage black muscle car that blended anonymity with power. "Let's go, boy," he whispered, opening the passenger door. Buddy limped inside, settling onto the worn leather seat with a sigh. As Keanu drove away, he saw the biker in his rearview mirror, still standing there, staring after the car, his humiliation radiating like the desert heat. The quiet sanctuary had been breached, and Keanu knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that this was not over. The man's pride had been wounded far more deeply than a simple punch ever could have. And wounded pride, in a man like that, was a dangerous, unpredictable thing. It festers. It seeks retribution not for the initial offense, but for the perceived slight of the response. The de-escalation had been a public unmanning, and that debt would have to be paid. The heat shimmer over the long stretch of asphalt back to the set seemed to distort the world, making it waver, making it unstable. The quiet was gone. An hour later, a fragile peace had settled. Buddy was resting in Keanu's trailer, the air conditioning a cool balm on his bruised hip. He had a slight limp, but the vet on set had checked him over and confirmed it was just deep tissue bruising. He would be sore, but he would be fine. The incident had been logged with set security, a formality that felt hollow. The studio's top security man, a polished executive named Mr. Thorne, the consultant, as he was known, had called personally, his voice a smooth balm of corporate concern. "Keanu, I am so sorry you had to experience that. Unacceptable. We're increasing patrols in the area. These local gangs can be a nuisance, but I assure you we will handle it." Thorne's reassurance felt slick, rehearsed. Keanu thanked him, his responses clipped and non-committal. The world of men like Thorne was one of liability and mitigation, not justice. Outside, the on-set animal handler, a man named Leo, approached the trailer. Leo was a fixture on animal-friendly sets, a man whose gentle demeanor and seeming love for his charges made him universally trusted. He had worked with the dogs on all the Wick films. He knocked softly on the door. "Keanu, heard what happened. Just wanted to check on the big guy." Leo smiled, his expression a mask of sympathy. "Some people are just trash, man." "I can't believe it." He held up a small, greasy paper packet. Brought him a little peace offering. A guy from craft services said he felt bad, grilled up a special sausage for him. All natural, no spices. Buddy's ears perked up at the smell. His tail gave a hopeful thump against the cushion. Keanu hesitated. He was cautious, meticulously so, about what Buddy ate. But this was Leo, a man whose entire career was built on animal welfare. And the gesture, however small, felt like a reassertion of the goodness of people against the ugliness he'd just witnessed. "Thanks, Leo. That's kind of you." Leo passed the packet over. "Least I could do. He's a good boy. He deserves a treat." He gave Buddy a final pat and ambled off, disappearing back into the bustling ecosystem of the set. Keanu unwrapped the sausage. It was thick, glistening with fat, still warm. He broke off a small piece. Buddy nudged his hand, his honey-colored eyes fixed on the morsel. "Okay, boy. Just a little." He gave the piece to Buddy, who devoured it in a single gulp, then looked up expectantly for more. Keanu smiled, the first genuine smile of the day, and gave him the rest. It felt like a small victory, a moment of normalcy reclaimed. For 10 minutes, it was. Then the world fell apart. Buddy, who had been dozing, suddenly stood up, a low whine escaping his throat. His body went rigid. He took a stumbling step, his legs splaying out. A tremor started in his hindquarters, a violent, uncontrollable shaking. Keanu was at his side in an instant. "Buddy, what is it?" The dog's eyes were wide with confusion and fear. He tried to walk toward Keanu, but his coordination was gone. He collapsed onto his side, his breath coming in ragged, shallow gasps. A slick line of foam appeared at the corner of his mouth. "No," Keanu breathed, the word a knot of ice in his stomach. No, no, no. This wasn't the bruise. This wasn't a reaction to the kick. This was poison. The sausage. The peace offering. A friendly gesture was a lie, a Trojan horse delivered with a smile. The calm that was his armor, his weapon, his identity, evaporated. It was replaced by a white-hot singular focus. There was no thought, only action. He scooped Buddy into his arms, a dead weight of 70 pounds, and burst from the trailer. The controlled chaos of the set blurred into a meaningless backdrop. He ignored the shouts of crew members, the questioning looks. His world had shrunk to the shuddering animal in his arms and the ticking clock that had just been activated. He laid Buddy carefully on the passenger seat of his car, his own hands trembling for the first time in years. The dog's paws were twitching, a horrifying, rhythmic dance of misfiring nerves. His breathing was a faint, wet rattle. Keanu slammed the car into gear tires screaming on the hot asphalt as he peeled away from the set, leaving behind the world of make-believe for a reality that was suddenly more brutal and terrifying than any scene he had ever filmed. The kindness of a stranger had been a lie. The apology was an attack. The sanctuary had not just been breached. It had been poisoned from within. And as he raced down the desert highway, the speedometer climbing, he knew this was no longer about a random act of cruelty. This was an execution. And they had used his trust, his friend, as the delivery system. The rage was a pure, cold thing, a sliver of Arctic ice in the furnace of his panic. First, he would save his dog. Then he would find them. All of them. The black muscle car devoured the asphalt, a projectile of focused intent. Keanu's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. Every red light was a personal affront. Every slow-moving truck, a physical obstacle to be navigated with a surgeon's precision. He drove with a controlled fury, weaving through traffic, his mind a frantic calculator of routes and risks. The on-set vet was equipped for scrapes and sprains, not for this. He needed a real clinic, a place with diagnostic tools and an ICU. His mind raced, cycling through GPS data and local knowledge gleaned from weeks of exploring the area on his motorcycle. He remembered a small, unassuming sign on a back road miles from the town's main drag. Harper Veterinary Clinic. 24-hour emergency. It was a gamble, but the highway to the larger town center was already backing up. He took the next exit, the car's suspension groaning as he pushed it onto a less traveled county road. Beside him, Buddy's condition was deteriorating. The tremors had subsided into a terrifying stillness, his body limp. His gums, when Keanu dared to pull back his lip, were pale, almost white. His breathing was a shallow whisper. "Hang on, boy," Keanu repeated, the words a mantra against the rising tide of despair. "Just hang on. We're almost there." He was talking to the dog, but he was also talking to himself, trying to keep the icy tendrils of panic from wrapping around his own heart. The guilt was a suffocating weight. He had given him the sausage. He had trusted the smile. He had let the enemy into his fortress, had personally handed him the weapon. The trust Buddy had given him was absolute, and he had failed to protect him from the one danger he couldn't see. The clinic appeared suddenly, a low-slung building of faded stucco that looked more like a forgotten auto shop than a place of healing. A single pickup truck was parked out front. He screeched to a halt, gravel crunching under the tires, and was out of the car before the engine was off. He gathered Buddy's limp form into his arms, the dog's head lolling against his shoulder. He kicked the clinic door open and stumbled inside. The waiting room was small, clean, and empty. A woman with sharp, intelligent eyes and gray-streaked hair pulled back in a severe bun looked up from behind the counter. She wore blue scrubs. This had to be Dr. Harper. "I need help," Keanu said, his voice raw, stripped of all artifice. "My dog. He's been poisoned." Dr. Harper didn't waste a second on surprise or recognition. Her gaze dropped instantly to the dog, her expression shifting from professional calm to high alert. She was all business. "In here. Now." She gestured toward an examination room, already moving to clear a stainless steel table. The room was bathed in the cool blue-white light of a surgical lamp. It was sterile, functional, and suddenly the most beautiful place on earth. Keanu laid Buddy down gently. "What happened?" "Exactly." Dr. Harper was already checking Buddy's vitals, her fingers pressing against his inner thigh to find a pulse. "He was given a sausage about 20, maybe 25 minutes ago. A few minutes later, he started convulsing. Then this." Her eyes met his. "Did you see who gave it to him?" "The animal handler on my set. He said it was from craft services." "Sausage," she muttered, her fingers moving with practiced efficiency. She was inserting an 4 catheter into Buddy's leg. "High-fat content. Excellent medium for lipid-soluble toxins. It speeds up absorption." She worked with a quiet intensity, her focus absolute. She drew blood, her movements swift and sure. "His heart rate is dangerously low. He's in hypovolemic shock. Pale gums, delayed capillary refill." She looked at Keanu directly, her gaze unflinching. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a dog getting into the trash. The rapid onset, the neurological symptoms followed by collapse. Someone knew what they were doing. Her words landed like hammer blows, confirming the cold dread that had taken root in Keanu's heart. This was calculated, deliberate, an act of targeted malice. "What is it?" he asked, his voice tight. "Based on the presentation, I'd guess a cocktail. A fast-acting neurotoxin to incapacitate him, mixed with a powerful anticoagulant. Something like bradifalcum, the kind of stuff they use in commercial rodenticides. It prevents blood from clotting. He's bleeding internally." She hung a bag of clear fluid on the IV pole. "We need to counteract both. We'll start him on vitamin K to fight the anticoagulant, but I need to flush the neurotoxin. Can you save him?" The question was stark, stripped of hope. Dr. Harper didn't offer false comfort. "I can try." "The next hour is critical. We have to stabilize his blood pressure and fight the poison before it causes irreversible organ damage." She pointed to a small stool in the corner. "You can wait here, or you can help. I need pressure on this vein. Keep it steady." She handed him a wad of gauze. Having a task, a way to contribute, was a lifeline. He pressed down on the gauze, his hand covering hers for a moment. His touch was steady, his focus absolute. In that moment, he wasn't a movie star. He was just a man trying to save his friend, a silent partner in a desperate battle waged under the cold, unforgiving light of a vet's examination table. The ticking of the clock on the wall was the only sound, each second a lifetime. The next hour was a blur of controlled, urgent activity. Dr. Harper moved with the grace of a seasoned warrior, administering injections, monitoring Buddy's faint heartbeat on a small, flickering screen, and issuing quiet, precise commands. Keanu remained by the table, a silent, steadfast presence. His task with the gauze had ended, but he didn't move. He watched his friend's life hang in the balance, his helplessness a physical ache. The blue-white light of the clinic reflected off the stainless steel, creating a cold, sterile environment that felt a million miles away from the warm, dusty desert. Yet here, in this room, a desperate fight for warmth and life was underway. "His blood pressure is stabilizing," Dr. Harper said, her first words in what felt like an eternity. She was studying the monitor, her brow furrowed in concentration. "The fluids are helping." But the toxin is the real enemy. It's a race to see if the vitamin K can get his clotting factors working before the internal bleeding becomes catastrophic. She turned to look at him, her sharp eyes assessing him as carefully as she had assessed his dog. You said the animal handler gave you the sausage? Leo. Yes. He said it was from someone in craft services. Keanu's voice was a low monotone, the sound of tightly controlled rage. Leo, she repeated, filing the name away. And this happened right after an incident? With some bikers? Yes, about an hour before. The kick wouldn't have done this, she stated, confirming his own conclusion. But the timing is convenient. Create a public scene, then slide in with a supposed act of kindness when everyone's guard is down. It's classic misdirection. She was thinking like a strategist, not just a doctor. She saw the pattern, the cold logic behind the cruelty. A small, shuddering breath escaped Buddy's lips. It was shallow, but it was there. A flicker of life in the face of overwhelming odds. Keanu rested his hand on the dog's head, his touch impossibly gentle. He's a fighter, he whispered. Dr. Harper nodded, a flicker of empathy softening her professional facade. He'll have to be. As if on cue, Keanu's phone, which he'd left in the car, began to ring. He'd retrieved it earlier, a lifeline to the outside world he both needed and resented. He glanced at the screen. Thorne, the head of studio security. The consultant. He let it ring. He didn't have the capacity for corporate platitudes. The phone stopped, then immediately buzzed with a text. Keanu, heard about Buddy. I am so sorry. I'm heading to the local vet now. My team is at your disposal. We'll find who did this. The message was a perfect blend of sympathy and authority. To anyone else, it would be reassuring. To Keanu, in the cold light of this room, it felt obscene. A wolf offering to help find who attacked the sheep. The dramatic irony was a bitter pill. Thorne was playing the part of the savior, positioning himself as Keanu's ally, while, in all likelihood, being connected to the very source of the attack. At this point, everything was suspect. Everyone was a potential enemy. Leo, the friendly handler, the smirking biker with the tiger claw patch, the smooth-talking consultant orchestrating things from the shadows. They were all part of a web, and Buddy was the one caught in the middle. Keanu made a decision. His grief, his fear were fuel, but they had to be channeled. Revenge was a hot, blinding emotion. Justice was cold, patient, and precise. He would not let rage cloud his judgment. He would become what his roles had taught him to be, a man who could absorb chaos and return it as focused, undeniable truth. He looked at Dr. Harper. I need to find the man who kicked him. He was part of a biker crew. He wore a patch. A tiger's claw. There are a few local crews, she said, her attention still mostly on Buddy. Most are just weekend warriors. Some are trouble. A tiger claw doesn't ring a bell immediately. But the sheriff would know. Sheriff Hank, Keanu said, the name coming to him. He'd met the local sheriff, Hank Miller, at a town hall meeting a month ago. A straight-arrow, no-nonsense cop who seemed unimpressed by the Hollywood circus that had descended on his county. A man who might actually listen. He's a good man, Dr. Harper confirmed. Doesn't play favorites. The pieces were beginning to form a coherent, if terrifying, picture. The brawl was a distraction. The poisoning was a message, or perhaps an escalation. But why? What was the ultimate goal? It couldn't just be about intimidating an actor. It was too elaborate, too vicious. The stakes were higher than a simple grudge. He's not out of the woods, Dr. Harper warned, bringing him back to the present. Not by a long shot. He needs to stay here, in the ICU, for at least 48 hours. If he makes it through the night, his chances improve dramatically. She looked at him, her expression softening just a fraction. Go. Do what you have to do. I'll call you if there's any change. Any change at all? Keanu nodded, a silent pact of trust passing between them. He gave Buddy one last, gentle stroke. The dog's side rose and fell in a fragile rhythm. It was enough. It was hope. He walked out of the sterile, blue-white light of the clinic and back into the oppressive desert heat. The world looked different now. The colors were sharper, the shadows deeper. The sanctuary had been burned to the ground. Now it was time to hunt the arsonists. He would start with the tiger claw. The desert night offered no relief from the heat. It was a blanket of oppressive warmth, the air thick and still. Keanu drove not toward the film set, a place that now felt tainted and hostile, but back toward the scene of the initial crime. The dusty cafe was closed, its windows dark, a ghost station on the edge of a lonely highway. This is where it began. With a kick, a smirk, and a patch. He parked his car a block away and walked, a shadow moving through the deeper shadows cast by the moonlight. He needed to talk to Maggie, the waitress. She had seen something in his eyes, and he had seen something in hers. A shared recognition of injustice. Her address wasn't hard to find. In a small town, information flowed like water. He found her in a small apartment complex on the edge of town, the kind with outdoor stairwells and peeling paint. He didn't knock. He waited. He leaned against the cool stucco of the opposite wall, a patient sentinel. An hour passed. Then a beat-up sedan pulled into the parking lot. Maggie got out, looking tired from her shift. She saw him immediately. She didn't startle, but her body tensed. "You," she said, her voice quiet. "I thought you'd be gone." "My dog is at the vet," he said, his voice flat. "Someone poisoned him." Maggie's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. "Oh my God, is he?" "He's fighting." He stepped closer into the weak light of a porch lamp. "The bikers, the one who kicked him. You saw them. Did you see where they went?" She hesitated, twisting the strap of her purse. "Look, I don't want any trouble. Those guys, they're bad news. They've been terrorizing this whole area for months." "What kind of trouble?" Keanu pressed, his tone gentle but insistent. "Extortion, vandalism. They lean on the local businesses. The sheriff's department seems slow to react." This aligned with what Dr. Harper had hinted at. A systemic problem, not just a random encounter. "I need to find them, Maggie." "Why?" "To get even." "That big one, they call him Cutter. He'd kill you." "This isn't about getting even," Keanu said, and she could hear the absolute sincerity in his voice. "This is about finding out why. The man who kicked my dog, that was a spark. The poisoning was the fire. I need to know who lit it." His quiet intensity was more compelling than any threat. She sighed, her shoulders slumping. "They have a clubhouse. An old abandoned warehouse off Route 7. It's where they always go. But you can't just walk in there." "I won't," he promised. He needed information, not a confrontation. Not yet. He then made his second call of the night, this time to a burner phone he kept for true privacy. He dialed the number for Sheriff Hank Miller. The sheriff picked up on the second ring. "Miller. Sheriff, it's Keanu Reeves. We met at the town hall meeting." There was a pause. "I remember. What can I do for you, Mr. Reeves?" "Bit late for a social call. My dog was poisoned this afternoon." He laid out the facts, spare and concise. The incident with the biker, the patch, the subsequent poisoning via the sausage, the vet's diagnosis of a deliberate, sophisticated cocktail of toxins. He left out Leo's name for now, holding that card close. "I see," Hank said, his tone shifting from wary to serious. "And you think the two events are connected?" "I do." "The tiger claw patch," Hank mused. "That's the Lost Disciples MC. They're not local. They blew into town about 2 months ago, around the same time your production started setting up. We've had a spike in petty crime and intimidation complaints ever since, but nothing we could ever make stick. They're slippery. The waitress at the cafe said they have a clubhouse. An old warehouse on Route 7. She's right, Hank confirmed. And she's also right that it's not a place you want to visit. My hands are tied, Mr. Reeves. I can't get a warrant for a warehouse based on a sick dog and a biker being a jerk. I need more. I understand, Keanu said. I'm not asking you to. But I have a question. The studio hired its own security consultant for this film. A man named Thorne. He's ex-military, runs a high-end firm. He told me his people were increasing patrols. Thorne, Hank said, a note of distaste in his voice. Yeah, I've met him. All polish and procedure. His team are mostly ex-cops and ex-military, all licensed. On paper, they're clean, but they operate in a gray area. They don't share intel. They handle things in-house. The pieces were starting to connect, forming a disturbing lattice of corruption and deceit. A new biker gang arrives when the film does. The studio's private security operates with impunity. And in the middle of it all, a dog is poisoned as part of a larger, unseen game. Keanu thanked the sheriff and hung up. He now had a location. He drove the dark, empty roads, the car a silent predator gliding through the night. He found the warehouse on Route 7 easily, a hulking skeleton of corrugated metal set back from the road, surrounded by a chain-link fence. A dozen motorcycles were parked in a neat, menacing row near the entrance. Light spilled from a few grimy windows, and the faint, distorted thud of heavy metal music leaked into the night. This was the den. This was where the answers were. He parked a quarter-mile down the road and approached on foot, using the desert scrub and darkness as cover. He found a spot on a low ridge overlooking the compound, a perfect vantage point. He took out a pair of small, powerful binoculars from his trunk. He settled in to watch. For hours he observed. Bikers came and went, their movements casual, confident. He saw Cutter, the big man who had kicked Buddy, swaggering out to his bike, laughing with his companions. The rage simmered, but Keanu kept it locked down. Patience, observation. Then, just after 2A, a nondescript sedan pulled up to the gate. It was a standard studio rental, the kind that littered the set. The driver got out. Keanu's blood ran cold. It was Leo, the friendly animal handler, the man who had delivered the poisoned sausage with a sympathetic smile. The world tilted on its axis. Leo, the gentle dog lover, the trusted colleague, was here. At the den of the lost disciples. Keanu zoomed in with the binoculars, his focus absolute. The image sharpened, confirming the impossible. Leo looked nervous, his shoulders hunched, a stark contrast to the aggressive posture of the bikers. He was met at the gate by a wiry biker with a long, greasy ponytail. Leo handed him a thick envelope. Cash, a payoff. The biker took it, counted it quickly, then nodded. He said something to Leo, who flinched, then nodded back meekly. Leo scurried back to his car and drove off, his tires kicking up dust as he sped away. The scene was sickeningly clear. Leo was not just a delivery boy. He was complicit. He was their inside man. The betrayal was so profound, so intimate, it almost took Keanu's breath away. He had trusted this man with the well-being of the animals on set. He had trusted him with Buddy. Keanu didn't follow Leo. The handler was a pawn, a frightened, debt-ridden cog in a much larger machine. The real answers were still inside that warehouse. He had to get closer. He circled the perimeter of the compound, moving with a silence born of years of physical training. He found a section of the fence that was weaker, rusted through at the bottom. Using a small, multi-tool army knife from his pocket, a practical gift from a props master years ago, he quietly pried back a section of the chain link, creating a gap just large enough to slip through. He was inside. The main warehouse was a fortress of noise and light. Getting in the front door was suicide. He scanned the building's exterior. His eyes landed on a series of grimy, high windows near the back, one of which was cracked, a spiderweb of fractures in the glass. Below it was a stack of old, rotting pallets. It was a climb, but a possible one. He moved toward it, sticking to the deepest shadows. The ground was littered with broken glass and debris, each step a calculated risk. He reached the pallets and began to climb, testing each one for stability before putting his full weight on it. He reached the window and peered through the grime and the crack. The interior was a large, open space. A makeshift bar stood at one end, and couches were arranged in the center. About 15 bikers were scattered around, drinking, talking. And there, holding court in the center of the room, was Cutter. He was holding the envelope Leo had delivered. "Look at this," Cutter boomed, waving the cash. "Our little movie mole pays on time," said the pretty boy actor, "is running around like a chicken with his head cut off. His mud is probably dead by now." A few of them laughed. The sound was ugly, grating. "You're an idiot, Cutter," said the wiry biker who had met Leo. "The boss said to rattle his cage, not go nuclear. Poison? That brings a different kind of heat." "He dissed me," Cutter growled, his face darkening. "In front of people. That dog was just the start." "And the boss?" "The boss wants chaos. He wants the production spooked. That's what we're providing. The boss." Keanu's focus sharpened. This confirmed it. The bikers were just muscle, a disposable crew of thugs following orders. But whose orders? The wiry biker lowered his voice, but Keanu could still read his lips through the binoculars, his mind filling in the gaps. "The consultant pays us to be a distraction, not a homicide squad. He needs the set security focused on us, on the perimeter, so his guy on the inside can grab the package. You put that whole operation at risk." The consultant, Thorne, the smooth, reassuring voice on the phone, the man offering his full support. He was the boss. He was the one pulling the strings. It all clicked into place with sickening clarity. Thorne had hired the Lost Disciples to create a perimeter threat, a constant low-level wave of harassment and vandalism. This would force the legitimate set security to focus their resources outward, watching the fences, chasing biker ghosts in the desert. It was the perfect diversion. While everyone was looking outside, Thorne's real operative on the inside could execute the real mission: steal the package. Keanu's mind raced. What package? What was on this set that was valuable enough to warrant this level of violent, high-stakes conspiracy? He thought about the new technology the production was testing. A revolutionary piece of equipment. An experimental neural camera. A prototype worth millions, not just for its cinematic potential, but for its military and surveillance applications. It recorded not just light and sound, but biometric data, emotional responses, mapping the brain's reactions in real time. In the wrong hands, it was a tool for profound manipulation and control. And Thorne, with his security credentials and unrestricted access, was perfectly positioned to orchestrate its theft. Keanu felt a surge of cold fury, but he wasn't the target. He was just collateral damage in a high-tech heist. A pawn sacrificed to create a ripple of chaos that Thorne could exploit. He had the whole picture now. The first twist Leo the handler was just the entry point. The second twist Thorne, the consultant, was the endgame. He slid down from the window, his movements silent and sure. He had what he came for. He slipped back through the fence and walked back to his car, the desert night air feeling colder than ever. The hunt was no longer just for a man who had hurt his dog. It was for a man who had weaponized trust, manipulated chaos, and was about to get away with a crime that had implications far beyond a simple movie set. And Keanu was the only one who knew. He had to expose him. But Thorne was smart, protected by layers of corporate legitimacy and plausible deniability. A direct accusation would be his word against a respected security executives. He needed proof. He needed leverage. He needed to turn Thorne's own game against him. The first call he made was to Leo. He used the burner phone, blocking his number. The handler answered on the first ring, his voice shaky and thin. "Hello?" "Leo," Keanu said. The name hung in the air, heavy with accusation. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line, followed by dead silence. "I know where you were tonight, Leo. I saw you at the warehouse." "I saw the envelope." Panic turned Leo's silence into a sputtering stream of denials. I don't know what you're talking about. I was at home." "Save it," Keanu cut in, his voice like chipped ice. "You gave me the sausage. You gave my dog poison. You took money from the men who did it. You're not just complicit, Leo. You're an accessory. When this comes out, your career is over. You'll go to prison." A sob broke through the phone. "I didn't know. I swear, I didn't know they were going to poison him. It was just a debt. A gambling debt. They said they just wanted your schedule. Your routes. When you were offset. They were just supposed to follow you, make some noise, scare you a little. Cutter. He went rogue. I never wanted the dog to get hurt. I love dogs. You know that." The pathetic, self-serving justification was nauseating. "Who is the boss, Leo?" Keanu asked, his voice relentless. "The man they answer to. The man who hired them." "I don't know," Leo whimpered. "They just call him the consultant. I never met him." "I swear." "You're lying," Keanu said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "You know who he is. And you're going to tell me. You're going to tell me everything. And then you're going to testify. It's your only way out of a murder charge." He let that sink in. The threat was a calculated bluff. Buddy was still alive, but Leo didn't know that. The handler broke completely, the dam of his fear and guilt bursting. Through ragged sobs, he confessed everything. The debt, the initial contact from Cutter, the agreement to provide Keanu's movements, and the name, Thorne, the studio security consultant. Leo admitted Thorne had approached him weeks ago, exploiting his financial desperation, framing it as a simple internal security audit that required tracking a high-value asset's movements. Leo, terrified and in debt, had rationalized it. He was just providing data. He wasn't hurting anyone. Keanu recorded the entire confession. It was his first piece of concrete evidence. His second call was to Sheriff Hank. "Sheriff, I have a name for the man who hired the lost disciples. Mr. Thorne, the studio's consultant." "Thorne?" Hank sounded skeptical, but intrigued. "That's a heavy accusation. You have proof?" "I have a sworn confession from a confidential informant," Keanu said, choosing his words carefully. "And I have a theory. Thorne is using the bikers as a diversion to steal something from the set. The experimental neural camera." There was a long pause on Hank's end. "That makes a terrifying amount of sense. His jurisdiction and access would put him in the perfect position. But we still can't move on him without catching him in the act. His entire life is plausible deniability." "He's going to make his move tonight," Keanu said, a cold certainty in his voice. "There's a studio charity gala. A big PR event. It's the perfect cover. High profile, chaotic, all the top brass in one place. He'll use the confusion to slip away with the prototype. How can you be so sure?" "Because he's arrogant," Keanu said. "And because he thinks I'm still just a grieving pet owner. He's underestimating me." Just then, his other phone rang. It was Dr. Harper. His heart seized. "How is he?" "He's a fighter," she said, and Keanu could hear the exhaustion and relief in her voice. "His vitals are stable. The vitamin K is working. He's sleeping. He's not out of the woods, but he made it through the night, Keanu. He made it." The relief was so immense, so overwhelming, it almost brought him to his knees. Buddy was alive. The core of his world, the reason for this entire furious journey, was safe. The rage inside him didn't vanish, but it clarified. It was no longer a hot, vengeful fire. It was a cold, bright light. This was no longer about revenge for Buddy. Buddy was going to be okay. This was about justice. This was about stopping Thorne before he could hurt anyone else. "Sheriff," Keanu said, turning his attention back to the burner phone. "The gala tonight. Thorne is scheduled to present an award. A demonstration of the new camera technology." "I'll be there," Hank said, his voice now firm with resolve. "In an unofficial capacity. I'll have a couple of plainclothes deputies with me. If Thorne makes a move, we'll be ready." The plan was forming, a high-stakes gambit that would play out in the full glare of the public eye. Thorne wanted to use the gala as cover. Keanu would turn it into a spotlight. He drove back toward the city, the desert sunrise painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. He looked like a man who hadn't slept, a man who had been through a private war. He was heading for a different kind of war now, one that would be fought not with fists, but with information, exposure, and the quiet weight of truth. He had a recorded confession. He had a wary but willing sheriff. And he had the element of surprise. Thorne thought he was in control. He thought he was moving his pieces on the board, manipulating the bikers, the handler, and the actor. He had no idea that the actor was now the one directing the final scene. The gala was at a sleek, modern museum in the city, a world of glass and steel. It was the perfect stage for the final act. The charity gala was a symphony of manufactured glamour. The air hummed with the buzz of conversation, the clinking of champagne glasses, and the flash of cameras. Keanu moved through it all like a phantom, his presence both undeniable and distant. He wore a simple, perfectly tailored black suit, his public armor. His face was a mask of stoic calm, betraying none of the cold fury that coursed beneath. He saw Thorne near the stage, schmoozing with studio executives. The consultant was in his element, exuding charisma and control. He wore a tuxedo with the same ease he wore his corporate authority. He caught Keanu's eye and gave a small, sympathetic nod, a perfect pantomime of shared concern. "Keanu," he said, approaching him, "I'm so glad you could make it. Any news on your dog?" "He's stable," Keanu replied, his voice even. "The vet is optimistic." "That's wonderful news," Thorne said, his smile never wavering. "Truly, I've had my team running background on every known associate of that biker gang. We'll get them." The audacity was breathtaking. He was offering to hunt the very men he had hired. Keanu simply nodded. "Thank you." He let the silence hang, a small pocket of tension in the glittering room. He could see Sheriff Hank near the back, dressed in an ill-fitting blazer, looking deeply uncomfortable but alert. Two other deputies, a man and a woman, blended into the crowd near the exits. The trap was set. The main event of the evening was the presentation of the neural camera. The host on stage built it up with breathless hyperbole. And now, a glimpse into the future of cinema. A technology that doesn't just capture an image, but captures an experience. Here to present it is the man who keeps our productions safe and on the cutting edge, our head of special project security, Mr. Thorne. Thorne walked onto the stage to polite applause, a master of the universe in his element. He spoke about innovation, about safety, about the studio's commitment to pushing boundaries. It was a flawless corporate performance. "But seeing is believing," Thorne said with a flourish. "Tonight, we have a very special guest. Young Alex from the Children's Wish Foundation is a huge film buff. And his wish was to be the first person in the world to experience this new technology. Please give a warm welcome to Alex." A small boy, no older than 10, with bright, curious eyes and a slightly nervous smile, walked onto the stage. He was wearing a t-shirt with a picture of John Wick on it. The crowd cooed. Keanu's blood ran cold. This was the move. This was the leverage. Thorne, with the help of an assistant, gently placed a sleek, futuristic headset over the boy's eyes. "Now, Alex," Thorne said, his voice avuncular and kind. "This headset is going to show you a scene from a movie, but you're going to feel like you're right there. Are you ready?" The boy nodded, his excitement palpable. Keanu saw it then. A tiny, almost invisible earpiece in Thorne's ear. And on the lectern, a small disguised tablet that was wirelessly connected to the headset. This wasn't a demonstration. It was a hostage situation. Thorne's gaze swept the room and found Keanu. The consultant's smile tightened just a fraction. A message was being sent. A silent, brutal ultimatum. Through his own earpiece, connected to a listening device Hank had provided, Keanu heard the faint, tinny voice of one of Thorne's men speaking from a control room somewhere. "He's in position. The headset is slaved to our terminal. On your command, we can trigger the feedback loop, a high-frequency neural pulse. It won't be lethal, but the kid will have the worst migraine of his life and potential long-term neurological damage. Make sure Mr. Reeves understands." Thorne knew. He knew Keanu was onto him, and he had just turned an innocent child into a human shield. The choice was stark, presented in the full glare of 1,000 watching eyes. Chase revenge, expose him now and risk the child's safety, or let him walk away with the camera prototype to protect the innocent, the very arc he was meant to embody. Keanu looked at the boy on stage, at his trusting smile, at the sleek piece of technology wrapped around his head that was now a weapon. There was no choice, not really. He started walking toward the stage, not with aggression, but with a calm, deliberate purpose that drew every eye in the room. The music swelled. The host looked confused. Thorne's eyes widened slightly, a flicker of panic in his confident facade. This wasn't part of his plan. Keanu stepped onto the stage, took the microphone from the stunned host, and knelt in front of the boy. "Hey, Alex," he said, his voice soft, gentle. The boy's jaw dropped. You're John Wick. Sometimes." Keanu smiled. "I heard you're a big fan. Thank you. That means a lot to me." The entire room was silent, captivated by the unexpected interaction. Thorne was frozen, unable to intervene without revealing his hand. "You know," Keanu continued, speaking only to the boy, "the coolest thing about making movies isn't the technology. It's the imagination. Can you do me a favor? Before you try this, can you close your eyes and just imagine the most amazing movie scene ever? Can you build it right there, in your head?" The boy, mesmerized, nodded enthusiastically and closed his eyes. "Okay," Keanu whispered. "Now, while you're imagining, let's take this heavy thing off so it doesn't get in the way." With a smooth, practiced motion, he reached up and slid the neural headset off the boy's head. He had disarmed the bomb. He handed the inert headset to a stagehand as if it were a mere prop, then stood to his full height, turning his attention to the man who was now trapped on stage with him. Thorne's face was a mask of white, strained fury, his charismatic facade crumbling in real time. The crowd murmured, confused but riveted. This was better than any movie. Keanu held the microphone, but he didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Mr. Thorne," he began, his voice calm and carrying through the silent hall. "You talk about safety, about protecting the production. But that's not what you do." He pulled out his personal phone. On its screen was an audio file, queued up and ready. "This is a recording of Leo Gallo, the head animal handler for the film." He pressed play. Leo's panicked, sobbing voice filled the vast room, amplified by the state-of-the-art sound system. The confession echoed off the glass walls, the gambling debt, the deal to provide Keanu's schedule, the bikers, the fear, and the name, Thorne. The gasp from the audience was a collective, physical shock. Thorne looked around desperately, seeking an escape that wasn't there. Sheriff Hank and his deputies were moving quietly, sealing the exits. He used a local biker gang, the Lost Disciples, to create a perimeter of chaos. Keanu explained, his voice a steady narration over the damning audio. Vandalism, intimidation. He paid them to be a distraction. He swiped on his phone, bringing up a new file. A satellite image of the warehouse, time-stamped, with Leo's car circled in red. While set security was focused on the bikers, he planned to have an accomplice on the inside steal the neural camera prototype, the one he was just demonstrating. He gestured to the headset, but there was a complication. One of the bikers, a man they call Cutter, has a temper. He took things too far. He hurt my dog. And then, to escalate the chaos, to make the threat seem more random and feral, a poisoned sausage was delivered by Leo on Mr. Thorne's orders to manage the situation. Thorne lunged for the microphone. This is insane. It's a lie. This man is a delusional actor. But his voice was shrill with panic. The authority was gone. Keanu held up his hand, and the simple gesture had the power to silence him. The final piece of your plan was to use this event as your exit, Keanu said, his gaze locked on Thorne. And when you realized I knew, you made a new plan. You put a weapon on a child's head. You threatened a 10-year-old boy to guarantee your escape. He turned to the audience, to the cameras that were now streaming this live to the world. The headset was rigged, a neural feedback loop that could have caused permanent brain damage. This is the man you trust with your safety. It was over. The public exposure was absolute, undeniable. Thorne's face collapsed, the mask of the charismatic predator shattering to reveal the cornered, pathetic man beneath. He looked at the exits and saw the grim faces of Hank's deputies. He looked at the horrified faces of the studio executives. He looked at Keanu, whose expression was not one of triumph, but of grim finality. The consultant sagged, all the energy draining out of him, a puppet with its strings cut. The police moved in, their movements professional and quiet. They cuffed Thorne on stage, the clicking of the metal a sharp final sound in the silent room. The gala had become a crime scene. Later that night, Keanu visited the county jail. He didn't go to see Thorne or Leo. He went to see Cutter. The big biker was in a holding cell, arrogant and defiant even in his orange jumpsuit. What do you want? He sneered when he saw Keanu standing on the other side of the bars. Come to cry about your mutt? He's alive, Keanu said simply. Cutter laughed. Whatever. You got lucky. You and your stupid dog. You don't know who I am, do you? Keanu asked. It was a genuine question. Cutter squinted at him. Should I? You're just some Hollywood clown. Sheriff Hank stepped up beside Keanu. He slid a DVD case through the food slot of the cell. On the cover was the box art for John Wick. Cutter picked it up. He looked at the iconic image of the man in the suit, the myth, the legend. Then he looked up at the quiet, tired man standing in front of him. Recognition dawned, followed by a wave of pure, undiluted fear. The blood drained from his face. He finally understood. He hadn't just kicked a dog. He had kicked John Wick's dog. The terror in the biker's eyes was the only revenge Keanu needed. It was sharper and more lasting than any physical blow. The final stop was the vet clinic. The lights were low. Dr. Harper was sitting at her desk, asleep in her chair. Keanu walked quietly past her, toward the small ICU in the back. In a clean, warm enclosure, Buddy lay on a soft bed. A single 4-line was still attached to his leg. As Keanu approached, the dog's head lifted. His tail gave a weak, tentative thump. And then another, stronger this time. Keanu opened the door and sat on the floor. He didn't say a word. Buddy nudged his head under Keanu's hand, then gave it a long, slow lick. It was an act of forgiveness, of trust reaffirmed. The protector sat there on the cold linoleum floor, the warmth of his dog a grounding presence in the quiet of the night. The chaos was over. The sanctuary, though breached, was not broken. It was being rebuilt right here, with a silent promise and the soft thump of a tail against a worn leather jacket.